After the divorce, my wife took everything, but years later, she regretted it. There's a certain kind of pain that doesn't just hurt, it changes you. It's the kind that sneaks up on you in the middle of the night, wrapping around your chest like a vice, making it hard to breathe. The kind that turns good memories into something bitter, something you wish you could erase. That's the pain I felt when my wife left me. Not just because she walked away, but because of the way she did it. I used to think we were happy. Sure, we had our problems, but what couple doesn't? We had been together for years, built a life together, made plans for the future. I believed in us. I believed in her. I didn't see the cracks forming beneath the surface. But looking back, they had been there for a long time. She had been coming home later than usual, always with some excuse. Work ran late. A friend needed her help. She was just too tired to talk. At first I didn't question it, then came the secrecy. Her phone, which used to be left on the counter, was now always in her pocket, always face down. She started locking the screen, tilting it away when she texted. I noticed. I just didn't want to believe it. The night everything changed started like any other. I had just finished making dinner, her favorite, a recipe I had spent years perfecting. A small gesture, an attempt to bring us back to what we used to be. She walked in, saw the candles, the carefully plated food, and sighed. Not in surprise, not in appreciation, but in annoyance. That was the first time I truly felt it, that something was wrong. She sat down across from me, poking at her food, barely eating. I watched her, my stomach twisting. Finally, I asked, "Is something going on?" She didn't even hesitate. "I don't love you anymore." It was like being hit by a truck. I stared at her, waiting for a laugh, a shake of her head, some sign that this was a cruel joke. But her face was calm, detached. She had practiced this moment. I swallowed hard. "What are you saying?" She set her fork down, looking at me with cold indifference. "I want a divorce." I don't remember much after that. I remember the sound of my heartbeat too loud in my ears, the way my hands shook, the feeling of the chair beneath me, grounding me, keeping me from falling apart. I remember begging, asking why, asking if we could fix it. And I remember the way she looked at me, not with sadness, not with guilt, but with relief. As if she had been carrying a heavy burden, and now that she had finally said the words, she felt free. That's when I asked the question I had been afraid to ask. Is there someone else? For the first time that night, she hesitated. Then she smiled. Not a sad smile. A knowing one. Yes. People talk about heartbreak like it's a metaphor, but in that moment, I felt it physically. Like something inside me had torn open, like I had been gutted from the inside out. And she just sat there, watching me fall apart, completely unaffected. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said, as if that made it better. "But I've never felt this alive before. He makes me feel things you never could." That was when I realized something. She wasn't sorry. Not even a little. She had already moved on while I was still sitting there, trying to understand how my entire world had collapsed in a single moment. And the worst part? She wasn't done taking from me yet. The divorce was brutal. She didn't just want to leave me. She wanted to erase me. She fought for the house, claiming she needed stability. She drained our savings, arguing that she had given up her career for our marriage and deserved compensation. She even took the car. I tried to fight back, but she had a good lawyer. And me, I had nothing. One by one, the things I had worked for, the things we had built together, were taken from me. And when it was all over, she walked away without looking back. I lost everything in the blink of an eye. One day, I was a husband, living in a home I had poured my soul into. The next, I was sleeping on a friend's couch, staring at the ceiling at night, wondering how the hell my life had fallen apart so fast. She, on the other hand, she was still in our house, spending our money, building a new life with him. To her, I was nothing more than a chapter she had closed. But what she didn't realize? I wasn't done writing my story yet. The first few months were hell. I barely ate, barely slept. I spent my days in a fog going through the motions, feeling like I was watching someone else's life fall apart. People told me to move on, to find someone new, that I'd heal. But I didn't want someone new. I wanted my life back. I wanted to be me again. And one day, something inside me just snapped. I was done grieving. I was done feeling like a victim. She had taken everything from me. But I was about to build something bigger, better, stronger than she had ever imagined. And one day, she was going to regret ever letting me go. There's a moment in life when you realize nobody is coming to save you. No miracle, no stroke of luck. Just you, standing at rock bottom, staring at the ruins of everything you once had. And in that moment, you have only two choices. Stay there, or start climbing. I chose to climb. The first few months after the divorce were brutal. I was broke, emotionally wrecked, and barely getting by. I slept on a friend's couch for a while, then moved into a tiny apartment with stained carpets and a leaky faucet. It wasn't much, but at least it was mine. Money was tight. I picked up whatever work I could find. Overtime shifts, odd jobs, anything to keep my mind occupied and my bank account from hitting zero. At night, I would lie awake staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my head. The way she looked at me that night, the way she told me she had moved on before I even knew there was something to move on from. Some nights it felt impossible to let go of the anger. Other nights I felt nothing at all. I was just numb. But then something shifted. One night I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the person staring back at me. I had let her take everything, not just the house, the car, the money. She had taken me. And I decided right then and there that I was taking myself back. At first, it was just about survival. I forced myself to eat properly, to exercise, to stop drowning in self-pity. I started reading everything I could get my hands on. Books about finance, personal growth, business. I cut off people who dragged me down, friends who only wanted to sit around and complain, family members who told me to just move on like it was that easy. Instead, I surrounded myself with winners, people who had been through hell and made it out the other side, people who built their own success. I wasn't just trying to get back to where I was trying to become someone I had never been before. And slowly I did. A year passed, then two. And something incredible happened. I started my own business. At first, it was just a side hustle, something small, something I worked on in the evenings in between shifts. But it grew. Clients came in. The money started flowing. And before I knew it, I was making more than I ever did when I was with her. I moved into a new house. Bigger, better, completely mine. I bought a brand new car not because I needed to, but because I could. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. I didn't think about her anymore. I didn't care. She was just a memory. Or at least that's what I thought. Until one night, our paths crossed again. It was at a high-end restaurant. I had a business meeting there, discussing a major deal. It was the kind of place where you wear tailored suits and drink wine that costs more than your first car. And that's when I saw her. Sitting at a small table near the corner, picking at her food, looking nothing like the woman who walked out of my life years ago. Her expensive clothes were still there, but they looked forced, like she was trying too hard. The glow she once had? Gone. And across from her, a man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Her new husband. The man she had left me for. And from the way he was scrolling through his phone, completely ignoring her, it was clear. Her perfect life wasn't so perfect after all. She didn't see me at first, but I saw everything. The way she glanced at him, searching for attention, only to be met with silence. The way she shifted uncomfortably when the bill arrived, hesitating for a second before reaching for her purse. The way she looked, lonely even though she wasn't alone. And for the first time in years, I felt something I never expected. Pity. She had thrown everything away for this. She had torn my life apart, taken everything from me, believing she was trading up. And yet, here we were. I had rebuilt myself from the ground up. And her? She was stuck in a life that clearly wasn't as perfect as she had imagined. And then, just as I was about to turn away, she looked up. Our eyes met, and I saw it. The exact moment she recognized me. Her lips parted slightly, her eyes widened. And in that second, I saw something I'd never seen from her before. Not anger, not arrogance, regret. For years I had dreamed about this moment. I had imagined 1,000 different scenarios, what I would say, how I would act, whether I would laugh in her face or pretend she didn't exist. But now that it was actually happening, I felt nothing. No anger, no bitterness, just calm control. Because for the first time in my life, I had the upper hand. She stared at me, her lips slightly parted, her face frozen in shock. I held her gaze for a moment, letting the silence stretch between us. Then I simply smirked and turned away. I didn't need to say anything. I had already won. But as I walked past her table, heading toward the exit, I heard her voice behind me. Wait! I paused. For a split second, I considered ignoring her completely. Just walking away and leaving her sitting there, drowning in her own regrets. But something in her voice caught my attention. Not arrogance, not confidence, but uncertainty. I turned back slowly. She was already standing, her fingers gripping the edge of the table as if she needed to steady herself. Her husband barely looked up from his phone, completely uninterested in whatever was happening between us. She took a hesitant step toward me. Can we talk? A part of me wanted to laugh. Talk? Now she wanted to talk? After all these years? After taking everything from me and never once looking back? I should have told her no. I should have walked away. But instead, I found myself saying, all right. Not because I wanted closure, but because I wanted to see just how much her life had fallen apart. We stepped outside onto the terrace. The night air was cool, a stark contrast to the tension hanging between us. She hesitated, staring at the city lights like she was trying to find the right words. I let her struggle. Finally, she sighed. You look different, she said quietly. I raised an eyebrow. That tends to happen when you're not being dragged down anymore. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. Instead, she dropped her gaze as if she couldn't meet my eyes. How have you been? She asked. I almost laughed. How had I been? Better than ever. But I didn't say that, and I just shrugged. I can't complain. She nodded, shifting uncomfortably. I heard you started your own business. So she had been keeping tabs on me. Interesting. I gave a short nod. Yeah, it's been going well. Another silence. She was clearly waiting for me to ask about her. I didn't. I already knew the answer. I had seen it on her face and the way she carried herself. She wasn't happy. She wasn't thriving. She was sinking, and now she was standing in front of the man she had once destroyed, hoping he'd throw her a lifeline. She took a slow breath. I'm sorry, she finally said. I tilted my head, pretending to be curious. For what? Her eyes flickered. For everything. I let out a quiet chuckle. Everything. That was a convenient way to sum up years of betrayal, cruelty, and selfishness. I crossed my arms. You'll have to be more specific. She hesitated. For how things ended. For hurting you. She was choosing her words carefully because she wasn't actually apologizing. She was testing the waters, trying to see if I still cared, if she still had some kind of hold over me. She didn't. I leaned against the railing, watching her squirm. Tell me, I said, my voice casual. Are you still with him? She tensed, and right then, I knew the answer. We're having some problems, she admitted. I almost smiled. Of course they were. She had left me because she thought he was an upgrade, because she was convinced that life with him would be so much better. But now she was standing in front of me, regretting everything, and it was delicious. I made a mistake, she said softly. There it was. The real reason she wanted to talk. She wasn't here just to apologize. She was here because she thought there was still a chance. That maybe, just maybe, I would take her back. I let the silence stretch between us, watching her shift uncomfortably under my gaze. Then finally I spoke. You did make a mistake. Her eyes flickered with hope. But not for the reasons you think. She frowned slightly. What do you mean? I took a step closer, lowering my voice just enough to make her lean in. Your mistake wasn't leaving me, I said. Your mistake was thinking I wouldn't become someone better without you. Her face paled. She knew it was true. She had spent all those years thinking she had won, that she had upgraded, that I was nothing without her. And now? Now she was seeing the truth. I had moved on. I had built something better. And she was the one who had lost. Her lips parted like she wanted to argue. But she had nothing to say, because deep down she knew the truth just as well as I did. Finally she whispered, I wish things had been different. I let out a small breath, shaking my head. They weren't. And with that I turned and walked away. I didn't look back, because unlike her, I never needed to. Regret is a funny thing. It doesn't hit all at once. It creeps in slowly, slipping through the cracks, building up over time. It starts as a whisper in the back of your mind, something you push away. But then one day you wake up, look around, and realize you destroyed something you can never get back. And that's exactly what happened to her. After our conversation, I thought that would be the end of it. I had walked away, left her standing there in the cold night air, drowning in the weight of her own mistakes. But she wasn't done yet. The next morning, I got a message. Her, a number I hadn't seen in years flashing across my screen. At first, I considered ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened the message. Can we talk, please? For a second, I just stared at it. Talk? Again? What more could possibly be left to say? But then I realized something. This wasn't just about regret. She wanted something, and I had a pretty good idea of what it was. I agreed to meet her, not because I owed her anything, but because I wanted to hear her say it out loud. I wanted to see her sit across from me, the woman who once ripped my life apart, and admit that she had lost. We met at a quiet cafe, not some fancy restaurant like before, just a small place on the corner, nothing special. When I arrived, she was already there, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee, eyes scanning the room nervously. She looked different. Tired. The kind of tired that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from years of disappointment. She glanced up when I walked in, forcing a small, hesitant smile. Thanks for coming, she said softly. I just nodded and sat down. I wasn't going to make this easy for her. She fidgeted with her cup, exhaling shakily. I don't really know how to start, she admitted. I waited. She had dug this grave, now she could lie in it. Finally, she looked up at me. My marriage is over, she said. I said nothing. She swallowed. He wasn't who I thought he was. Things have been bad for a while, but now it's just... She shook her head. It's falling apart. She was expecting sympathy. She got silence. She sighed, glancing down at her hands. I made a mistake. I tilted my head. Which one? You've made a lot. She flinched slightly, but I saw the flash of frustration in her eyes. She wasn't used to this version of me, the man who didn't bend to her words, who wasn't desperate for her approval. She cleared her throat. I shouldn't have left you. There it was. The real reason we were here, she wasn't just here to apologize. She was here because she thought there was still a chance. That maybe, just maybe, I would take her back. I let the silence stretch between us. Then finally I leaned forward slightly, my voice calm, steady. You didn't just leave me, I said. You took everything from me. You didn't hesitate. You didn't look back. And now that your life has fallen apart, you think you can come back? She opened her mouth, closed it again. For the first time, I saw something in her eyes I had never seen before. Not arrogance, not pity. Fear, because she finally realized. I wasn't hers anymore, and she had no power here, and I never needed her at all. She swallowed hard, forcing a weak smile. I just thought, maybe we could start over. I let out a breath of laughter. Start over? With the woman who had left me in the dirt? Who had drained my accounts and walked away without a second thought? With someone who only came back when she had nothing left? I shook my head. No. Her face crumbled. She looked away, nodding stiffly, as if she had prepared herself for this outcome. But I knew the truth. She had come here hoping. And now she was leaving with nothing. Just like she had left me. I stood up, tossing some cash onto the table for my coffee. Before I walked away, I looked at her one last time. She sat there, staring into her cup, broken and alone. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt vindicated, but all I felt was free. For years, I had carried the weight of what she did to me. Now? Now I was walking away from her, just like she once walked away from me. Only this time, I wasn't the one losing. She was. And this time, she had no one to blame but herself. But what would you have done in my place? Given her a second chance or walked away? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more stories.